From Portland, Oregon, it's time for A Different View, with women's perspectives on the fight to end prohibition again. With Portland Dispensaries examiner and mother of four, Jennifer Alexander, and professional healthcare provider Iva Cunningham from Alternative Medical Choices, Inc. Now, here's A Different View.
Hello, everybody. This is Iva Cunningham. I'm with Jennifer Alexander, and Russ is over there fidgeting with the cords and stuffs. You're listening to A Different View. It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Pacific time on RadicalRuss.com. I got the thumbs up. I guess something's good. I don't know what that means.
I think that means we're good now.
Hey, there you are. That sounds great, Jennifer. So yeah, just a little, election night's just right around the corner.
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today.
And most of us here in Oregon have got our ballots in the mail. So people that haven't gotten their ballots need to go to the election office and pick one up.
Right.
I know I got my ballot just the other day, and I'm getting ready to sit down with my computer and my ballot and go over the names that I do not recognize.
So you don't look at the ballot. Do you look at the ballot book when you're making your decisions?
I don't know. I have. I don't always. Usually I go look up the person more than anything and try to find out who they are. And
I'm always looking at voting records. I want to go back and see what they've done. What's their track record. That's always,
right.
That tells me, what they're going to do that's going to make a difference for me. Is there, what's coming out of their mouth even close to what they actually do?
Right.
You know what I mean? And
I did have a lady knock on my door today to let me know that it was election time and that I should vote for this candidate that she handed me some paperwork about, a guy I had never heard of. But before she left, I said, I wouldn't feel I was doing my part if I didn't make sure you were also going to vote for Measure 80.
And you will vote for Measure 80?
and she's like, and what's that? I'm like, you're sitting here going door to door for elections, and you don't know about
what's on
this.
The ballot,
it's amazing, how many people aren't aware.
I know, and that we can go on and on about why that is, and we've discussed that a couple of times. But the truth is that, when people are working on one ballot or one initiative, that's all they're focused on. They're not really familiarizing themselves with this stuff, unless you're like Kaliko or me or Russ or you, who.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning. I just left the studios. Here we are in Harlem.
It's music. It's because
everybody's here but the police, and they'll be here any minute.
Anyway, unless you're, it's really distracting. Unless you're really involved in politics as a general, and not just working for one person or something like that, you really don't know.
Yeah. Well, it tells me we've still got a little bit of work to do before election time here.
That's right. 2 weeks this will be, interesting to see what happens in the next 2 weeks. I know we've got some billboards going up, according to Sam Chapman from Oregon's for Law Reform. I see some Measure 80 signs back there.
Yes.
So I'm starting to see them come out. Maybe it's just because they're all over my house, but I don't know. But
I've noticed them popping up everywhere. My kitchen, my living room,
my car, my street, my neighbor. Funny. But no, I've seen a couple. I haven't seen too many, but I have seen some.
Yeah.
And then we've got Measure 64 in Colorado.
My son works
I-205.
for a car lot, and they have a Measure 80 sign in their window.
Nice.
So, yeah, they are popping up everywhere.
No, we're everywhere. Well, that's our cue. I think Russ is saying get off. All right, so we'll be right back. You'll listen to a different view with Jennifer Alexander, and I'm Iva Cunningham.
You don't give a darn if you don't play rap, 'cause the sky's high. So am I, yes. Yes, I vibe a bit, but I'm gonna vibe a bit on the 88 now. Oh, stop it, darling. I didn't know you cared. That's enough now. Wait a minute. Let me dream now.
Hi, this is Melissa Etheridge, and I'm encouraging you to vote yes on Amendment 64. Because a few years ago, I was going through cancer chemotherapy, and I was suffering. The nausea, the pain, it was terrible. Prescription drugs were not helping. The only thing that allowed me to function and regain my strength was marijuana, and I'm grateful for the relief it provided me. Before I needed to use marijuana, I just accepted the laws that treat marijuana users as criminals. But it's funny how a serious illness can give you a new outlook on life. I now see that it's wrong to arrest adults for using marijuana, and it's even more wrong to allow gangs and cartels to profit from selling marijuana. Instead, we should allow adults to possess limited amounts of marijuana, and we should regulate marijuana sales in order to generate tax revenues for public school construction and other community needs. To me, regulating marijuana is simply the right thing to do. Please vote yes on Amendment 64, paid for by the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol.
Work and hard are four-letter words. Rising early is for the birds. I've got a good job that keeps my vision blurred. I'm really good at selling weed. I won't flip burgers, I won't park cars. Hell, walking to the corner is walking too far. I'm sitting right here smoking a big cigar. Really good at selling weed.
That's music from Chief Greenwood, Selling Weed. And now we're back with A Different View.
Thank you.
Welcome back. You're listening to A Different View. I'm Jennifer here with Iva.
Hello, everyone.
So I was just going to talk briefly a little bit about some of the. I started playing, in the Monitoring the Future survey. And the reason that I did is because I was watching the Salem City Club debate and the Portland City Club debate and some of these other interactions where the opponents to Measure 80, the legalization initiative here in Oregon, they kept saying things like, look how miserable we did with alcohol, that this regulation isn't keeping our kids from drinking, more or less. So therefore, it was basically a sham for us to claim that regulation would affect minors using marijuana. And I always thought that we had reduced use, so I was like, well, let me go look. So I did. And actually, I was kind of shocked at how dramatic the use of alcohol had been over the years. The Monitoring the Future survey basically asks 8th, 10th, and 12th. Well, it was 12th graders originally starting in 1975, which was the data I was starting with when I first started looking at this.
10th through what?
But then 8th and 10th graders
10th,
also
okay.
started taking the survey starting in 1991. I was in high school from 91 to 94, so I actually remember these being implemented and just us having to sit down and say, have you ever used cocaine? Have you ever used heroin? And we're all looking at this thing like, are we really going to tell you if we have?
Yeah, really. Does it say name at the top?
I think that they were all anonymous. It's been years since I've did it. I really do want to, and I was thinking Russ might actually know if this is possible, but I really do want to pull up the survey. I want to see how it's presented to the kids. I want to, because as I'm looking at this data, it's got this sharp decline when I was in high school. Now, I know those kids. I know those kids. That's right. That's who I was in high school with. Those were my peers, And I know that quite a few of them were using a variety of, and we all knew. We knew who was using.
What year did you graduate?
94.
Okay.
So, in seeing how significant that dip was, leading from like this peak in 75, where it was like way up there, and then it drops down to like next to nothing in the 90s, and then it kind of comes back up. By 95, it's where it is now, and it's just a plateau from there.
So no change.
No real change. I mean, it kind of goes like, but any line does, there's no significant change in the last my entire adult life.
It's interesting that you should say that, Jennifer, because, I have siblings that are the same age as you and graduated high school around that time. And I remember them actually, when I was going to high school, everybody did marijuana. Cocaine was in the hills. If you went up there, everybody drank. There's not much else to do in Idaho, but there's lots of everything was available for the most part. There's some new stuff that,
right.
I've never even seen. But I do remember that, like, my sister and brother, just younger than me, didn't use anything. And I'm thinking, like, everybody ahead of them, we all tried marijuana. All of us tried alcohol. Every single one of us, tried something.
Right.
Some more than others. But anyway, but it just seemed to me that all of a sudden that trend just stopped. And it was right about that time. So I can kind of see,
But that's what I'm getting at is I'm wondering, did it just stop, or were people afraid to admit their use.
Well, there's a lot more DARE
know?
programs. DARE programs were just getting their start and really ramping up at about that time too. I mean, we didn't go through DARE programs. We had the Just Say
We had
No.
an assembly every week.
Yeah, we
you know,
did,
there
yeah.
was some. I remember one of them had Van Halen in it. That song. I cannot remember what it's called now, but it's like stuck in my head forever. And
except for right now.
well, it was when not Eddie Van Halen. When they switched the singer, you know.
Okay.
And Sammy Hagar, thank you. And it was like one of the first songs that he did that was a popular one on the radio. And so we had this huge assembly where the entire school, and we were like 8th through senior or 7th through senior, in one school. So this was like a lot of kids, you know, and it would splash up these different perfectly happy kids, and it was playing this Van Halen, and we all thought it was the cheesiest thing ever. Even the ones that didn't use drugs were just like, you're really gonna make us sit through that, you know? And I remember we had one like at least once a month.
Here's one for you. Vince Neil from Motley Crue.
No,
I've been playing rock and roll for a lot of years, and I've done it all. Now I do it without drugs. Hey, don't get me wrong, I still party with the best of them, but now I do it clean. You know, I'm on top of everything I do.
I gotta tell you, the idea, for one, I mean, the language, I party, but I do it clean. Isn't that what partying? I mean, maybe I'm like, I don't party.
You don't dance
myself.
around the Mayflower.
but it cracks me up the way that they all use like drug lingo,
right?
Because
partying, to say they're not part of the drug culture.
Drug lingo.
Yeah, it is drug lingo.
when you throw a party, that's not partying.
It's not party hats and some favors. No.
It always cracks me up to hear that. But yeah, that whole DARE mentality where it was like really being pounded into you. I think a lot of us probably chose to use drugs because we had it so splashed into our face.
But remember, MTV was coming of age, you know, when we were in high school, and then you're shortly after that. So, you know, a lot of those, your brain's on drugs. I had to stop and think about that one.
Yes,
and you know, things like that. And I remember a lot of those commercials from that time. And it seems to me that there was a lot more of that, those scare tactics being employed at that time, just specifically during the 90s.
Right. Well, and you know, one of the things that I find fascinating in these little data sets that I pulled up, and it only appears in 8th graders. The lifetime of any drug, any illegal drug specifically, illicit drug, is higher than marijuana.
Really? In 8th grade?
In 8th grade. It's so people were using more. This is only in the beginning.
So you know, think
back
that's when
when
they're
I
first
was in
getting
high
introduced
school.
to different drugs? Or
No,
that's
here's the thing that I really think it is, and why I want to find that survey. Our idea of illicit drugs versus all of the legal substances that kids use today for the same purpose, but it's not cocaine, it's not heroin, it's not, you know what I mean? It's we don't define those as illicit drugs. They're other substances. So I think how you ask the kids the questions is probably the biggest thing. But I think it's interesting that only in 8th grade and only in the 90s people were using that far more than marijuana, you know, these other drugs, whereas normally the other illicit drugs is lower than marijuana.
Well, the other thing too is it just like we were talking about phrasing, partying, and that's dope, dopehead, doper, unmotivated. Those were things I distinctly remember a lot of emphasis put on, you know, lack of motivation. You don't want to be that guy, and you know, 90s were a period of growth. Of rapid growth, and you know, and whenever that happens, you know, people go into those designer drugs. They can afford them more, so I think they're more prevalent. And I can see how even, you know, I can see how some people were like, "Oh, marijuana, that'll make you unmotivated," but here's some speed. You know,
no, exactly. I'll tell you in all honesty, before I ever smoked a joint, I had done mini thins. Mini thins are just little caffeine pills that people use to pop for speed.
Not Vicodin,
no, it's
but
pure caffeine.
Vibrant, that's what it was.
They're intended
pills.
to keep you awake. And I was given those at work one day by a coworker, you know, long before I had ever done marijuana, and I didn't think anything of it. until after I had taken it. My heart's beating like crazy.
What the heck?
But again, those were legal. You could go down to 7-Eleven and buy them. It was no big deal, and we were taught that marijuana is like PCP. You'll die. Don't take that. It was horrible. And we heard all about marijuana. But even like the other more dangerous drugs, we barely touched on. Marijuana was the focus.
Right.
And so you always thought marijuana was the worst. Like it would kill you. These other ones are a little less.
Well, who wants to have your brain cells destroyed? Oh my God. I mean, you're just starting your life, I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, 8th graders look up to the high school kids and when you're in high school, you're going through a lot of developmental changes and I mean, you have teenagers.
Well, and that's what when I first started looking, like I was saying earlier, I was looking to see, how had our attitudes about alcohol, our policies or whatever impacted minors drinking, the regulation and all. And what I found is that from 1975, when I was in high school, through 2011, just last year, alcohol use by seniors had been reduced 30%, from like 70% to 40%. Now, there's still 40% of them that have used alcohol. That's a lot. I get that. But then when you're comparing that to the adult population, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Kids were drinking like adults back in the 70s.
Right. Sure were.
Now,
and they were
now we're
smoking a lot of
actually,
weed, too.
affecting that. And in every grade level, you see that decline. And so you're looking at a different set of students every year who are less and less likely to be using alcohol through regulation. On the contrary, marijuana use is kind of all over the place, but specifically it's been gradually rising. I actually graphed, just those two comparisons.
I don't think that's a bad thing. I'd rather see kids do.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Not that I want to see kids do
either.
anything at all till they get old, till they become an age of responsibility, not consent, but responsibility.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're going to choose a drug.
Right. Clearly they're using something, you know, and to see that alcohol has continued to reduce in use year over year, comparing that set of students, and to see that marijuana has, slightly inclined. And it's not a direct correlation. It's not like they're all dropping their alcohol and picking up marijuana. But that shows that even with our very accepting society with alcohol, where everybody drinks, we have, mass marketing for alcohol, all of the things that they fear about legal marijuana, and yet we're seeing a reduction in use, not an increase in use, consistently.
It's because it's becoming commonplace. It's not that interesting.
Well, and I think it has to do with regulation, too, though. I mean, adults are held accountable for giving it to children. Children are held accountable for, possessing when they shouldn't be possessing.
Right.
They're discouraged from drinking. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting is to look at how people are drinking, because I think when I was a kid, again, I don't remember how I answered this survey, but I know when I was a kid, my parents would give me a little glass of champagne when they were toasting on New Year's. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like I was going out back with a fifth of, Jack Daniels and getting blasted. But if you asked me if I had had alcohol in the last year, yeah, I have.
Sure. It was in
I
the
also went to a
NyQuil?
Catholic church. Yes, I have. You know what I mean?
Massive,
there was a lot of. How distorted do these figures come? Because the questions are asked very neutrally like that. They don't explain to you, no, that's communion. That's not alcohol.
Right.
No,
that's
that's wine. You drink
Unless
alcohol.
They say other than, but the interesting thing when you were talking about things going up and down, and I'm not really too shocked by that, because drugs do come in and out of favor. LSD was really popular during the 60s and the 70s, as was cocaine and PCP. Marijuana has kind of always been all over the place, but, as other drugs have been introduced, remember the opium dens were available? Now they're not, now it's heroin. So I see drugs as always kind of like, what's the latest and greatest thing? But I think the thing to take away from there is that we're always going to be experimenting.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting is to see
kids start at a young age desiring to experiment.
Because any illicit drug use includes marijuana use. Of course, it reflects the changes in marijuana use. But they actually track a category, any drug other than marijuana, which means everything else. And that one is almost a flat line. There's a slight variation, but I mean it's pretty much almost level every year, every grade. In all categories. And that's pretty shocking right there, because marijuana is the only difference that we have year over year in our drug use, really.
Right.
You know.
Well, there's our cue. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. You're listening to A Different View with Jennifer Alexander, and I'm Iva Cunningham.
Marijuana legalization is on the Oregon ballot this November. I'm just one of over 500,000 Oregon adults who use marijuana annually, and I'm asking you to vote yes on Measure 80. Measure 80 would finally end the futile prohibition of marijuana and institute regulations that treat marijuana like alcohol. Measure 80 would end the facade of police trying to determine who is sick or healthy enough to put in a cage over a plant. Measure 80 provides jobs and tax revenue that Oregon desperately needs and institutes the industrial hemp crop our legislators already legalized. Best of all, Measure 80 protects our children by imposing the same educational and ID carding requirements that have brought teen alcohol drinking and tobacco smoking to their lowest ever recorded levels. Marijuana smokers are your family, your coworkers, and your friends, and we are 1 out of every 7 Oregon adults who deserve the same respect as our friends who enjoy fine Oregon wines and craft beers. We may be the only Oregonians who want to pay more taxes. Please donate to Oregonians for Law Reform at OregonLawReform.com and help us help Oregon by passing Measure 80.
We're back with A Different View.
Welcome back. I'm Jennifer, here with Iva.
I was having a little trouble with that earphones.
So 2 weeks from tonight is election night. Like we were saying in the opening, we all have our ballot, need to go through it and do a little research, but we're going to be doing some election night coverage.
Yes.
Russ, you want to summarize exactly what we got going on?
That's right. We got Marijuana Election Night 2012 here at RadicalRuss.com with coverage from 8 different states. 3 states voting for marijuana legalization, 2 states voting for medical marijuana, 1 state voting for medical marijuana to go back the way it was. California voting on a 3 strikes reform, plus 6 cities voting on various medical marijuana initiatives, and 4 cities in Michigan voting on decrim and low priority. We've got a live reporter for each state.
Awesome.
Starting at 4 o'clock Pacific, running through 10 o'clock Pacific. Polls close starting at 5 o'clock Pacific in Massachusetts, 5:30 in Arkansas, 6 o'clock in Colorado, 7 o'clock in Montana, 8 o'clock here on the West Coast.
Well,
Bam.
And who all's going to be here? Jennifer and I will be here.
We'll have Brian the Red's going to run the tech here. He'll be sitting in this seat running the technical stuff.
Because you'll be in Seattle.
Because I'll be in Seattle. Carrie Gallagher will be in Denver, Colorado. We'll have Herbage and Aiko at Measure 80 campaign headquarters here in Portland. Sam and Kaliko might be in here.
Okay.
We'll have Heather Morris from Montana Normal in Montana, Brian Denham from Arkansas from Compassionate Care in Arkansas, Rick Thompson from the Medical Marijuana Show in Michigan covering Detroit, Flint, Ypsilanti, and Grand Rapids, Mike Can for Boston covering the Massachusetts medical marijuana, and Ellen Comp from California Normal covering all the California votes.
Nice. That's to be a fun night.
Yep, sponsored by High Times Magazine, National Cannabis Coalition, law offices of Omar Figueroa, and theweedblog.com.
Excellent.
Woo, woo.
And do you have all of those legislations summarized in a blog somewhere?
I will be putting something like that together, sure.
Excellent.
Don't have them yet. Today I was summarizing the polls for all of them.
Yeah.
And the short list on those polls would be Massachusetts, Washington, real good. Colorado, pretty good. Montana, Oregon, Arkansas, not looking good.
Montana, really?
Yeah, the referendum in Montana's looking to get about the same support as the original medical marijuana.
Say the 4 not looking good again. Montana, Oregon.
Montana, Oregon, Arkansas. Don't look good. I don't know what the California polls are on the the proposition for 3 strikes reform. The California one is where they're saying they have these 3 strikes laws where if you get your third felony or your third arrest,
right, which has really contributed to the overflow.
Right. You get thrown away in prison. For a lot of times, the third arrest on these guys is a marijuana arrest or a few of them, shoplifting a pair of socks. Guy got his third strike on that.
Any incident with law enforcement will get you 3 strikes if you're already on the program.
So the reform would be, I call it, to extend the baseball third strikes metaphor, it would be your third strike has to be a strike. It can't be a foul ball. Your third strike has to be a violent felony. It has to be something violent, something major felony.
Right.
If it's just shoplifting, drug thing, something like that, it won't count as your third strike. It'll count as strikes 1 and 2, just like a foul ball would in baseball.
Right.
But third strike can't be a foul ball.
Right.
And well, even using the foul ball example, it's 4 foul balls, not 3.
No. Not pitched ball. Foul ball, foul tip. When you hit the ball and it goes foul.
Okay.
Sorry, baseball metaphor. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not a sports person. But either way, I think Oregon stands a chance. I think our biggest problem is that we're not being loud enough right now, and the opposition is being very loud, even though there's no official opposition. Doing some research into these guys, the opposition is just fascinating, and we need to be learning a little bit about what's going on.
Well, a lot of it is paranoia based, and it's keeping that. Well, a lot of it's
it's illusion is what it is.
Well,
it's a couple of people making
a big statements.
Well, making it loud and fairly anonymous in many ways, like. For instance, there was the whole thing with the billboards, which was purchased by Mount Hood Coalition with a phone number from a Florida Save Our Society on a website that was associated with 3 former sheriffs. It's like there's a lot of blur about who's behind that. Well, then I read a lot of the online articles about all of the different, back and forth, especially the commentary. You'll see the same comments appear on multiple blogs. And one of the letters to the editor that I was reading the other day was kind of really reefer mad, and it was sort of a summary of this other opposition that I had been looking at, but not in such long form.
In the Oregonian or
the Oregon Sheriff's Association Protect Our Society have their anti-legalization paper.
Oh yeah,
it's a quite long essay. What I found as a letter to the editor would be like if you took the topic sentence of each argument. But it was like the same arguments.
Right.
So I responded to it, and like 2 days later saw the exact same letter to the editor with a completely different group of names associated with the author. I'm like, this is the same paper written by different people.
Did you respond to that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. That's what I like about you, Jennifer.
I'm waiting to see who really wrote it, but it's a group.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting when you were talking about, Save Our Society and how, their links or their site, they cite themselves.
Yes.
Only they just name themselves. I just imagine how much bullshit I could come up with if I just, came up with different links to different sites and then citing myself and making them sound legitimate. Because, Save Our Society and, some of those, people are like, oh my God, they inspire fear in people just by the very name. Like, what's happening to our society?
One of the Save Our Society groups is called the Institute of Global Justice, which sounds so formal and appropriate, and that must be a governmental agency or a college and it's not. I don't even know if it's peer reviewed, but it sounds like it is. And so they cite this
it is by
all
themselves.
over the place.
I reviewed my own paper.
They cite this all over the place from their other links as though this is some big college that has these very thorough peer-reviewed
It's some online college
papers,
with 3
and
people
it's
attending.
Not.
Yeah.
And it's just hilarious. But we need to start doing this. We need to start doing this.
So Oregon's for Law Reform can cite Russ, and Russ can cite...
Well, no. So you wouldn't cite Radical Russ.
Right.
You would cite the institute that Russ makes up, the Institute of Cannabis Research or something, or
the Department of the Institute, the Department of the Institute of the
it's just
association.
It's got to sound real credible. It doesn't even matter if it's completely made up, so long as it sounds credible. Because as we know from going through the legislative process, no legislature is actually checking your footnotes. They're just looking for it to look credible. As a matter of fact, they're probably not even the one reading it. Their legislative aid is, and then's reporting back to them what they should think about it.
Right.
And there's so many steps along the way that it's just got to appear credible. There's too much stuff going on. They're not researching it, And we know this. So we give them all this stuff that's like incredulous, like they have a hard time believing it, and it's things that we've pulled all the sources out, but we don't have an Institute of Global Justice to point to with the research paper that makes our point.
I love that, the Institute of Global Justice. Whoa, that sounds serious. It sounds big. It sounds overwhelming. You can't, it's global.
It's global. It's an institute, so for greater learning and knowledge.
And it's about
and
justice.
research.
How could you be against justice, especially globally?
Well, and ironically, on this note, I had an interview with Sheriff John Trumbo finally after multiple phone calls trying to reach him. He finally called me back as I was getting ready to drive in my car, so it was like the worst possible.
I was going to drive to your office.
but so I sat there and I'm like, oh, good. I've been waiting for this phone call, And I asked him about the Protect Our Society group, and he basically said it was his name thrown on there just as filler. They never did circulate a petition. They never did any fundraising. So it's not hard to believe, that this is really like that he
just lent his name to.
And then promptly forgot about it. Like it wasn't anything. They didn't actually do anything.
Did they even get his permission or heard? I mean,
no, they did. They said, hey, we've got this initiative we want to introduce. We just need a name to put on it. He said, okay, and that was the last of it. They did nothing beyond that.
Really?
So, but the interesting part is that I told him, I was like, well, the website for the group by the same name that used that website back then has the exact same logo as the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, which it just so happens John Trumbo is an executive board member of. And so I asked him, I was like, why is that same heading used on both the State Sheriff's Association's essay and their website? He says, well, it's a catchy heading. He goes, I learned a long time ago you need something short and to the point. And so, he was very clear that their goal was to send a PR message, not to argue a factual debate, but something that would hit the people the way they wanted them to hit it, because they know nobody's going to look any deeper than the surface. That's how our society works, and it's kind of sad, but it's also kind of true. It's the one thing, like we have all the facts, we have all the statistics, the research paper, we have all that.
It's the
nobody's going to look at it,
but
we've got it
in the product that we're putting out. It's not very cohesive. I think that's been a fault that's been pointed out to us over and over again, is that we've struggled to get the platform that we have, and it's not very cohesive.
Well, and I don't think that's it as much as it's not short and sweet and to the point.
Well, yeah, cohesive, short, sweet, whatever. But I mean, I think we don't project our simple, straightforward message that, this is a safe alternative to harsher drugs. And by the way, everyone's doing it. So, and by the way, you're not locking anybody up. So why don't we just get rid of these old laws?
See, that's too long, though.
I
know. but yeah, I mean, I think especially if we lose Measure 80, we really need to be looking at what they're doing, because we know that I know for a fact that every single person that I've talked to, from the most prohibitionist to the most supportive of cannabis reform, have all agreed that our current laws aren't working. They're all agreeing with that. In various degrees, they say we need to change something. Most of them, and I would say like a significant majority of them, do say we should legalize it. But we'll probably vote no anyway.
Well,
and
part of
ultimately that means
bill.
that means either A, something is wrong with the language we're proposing. To some degree, I would agree with that, but for the most part, I don't think that's the problem.
Well,
the fear factor, our opposition with basically no money, although they have positions of power, don't get me wrong, but with no money, has managed to be louder and clearer and make their argument more effectively than we have. And the bill, like I said, there are a few things that I think have been raised as concerns.
What do you think the issue is in Colorado, though? Because Colorado is a fairly conservative...
Colorado is facing with the exact same people that we are right now. As a matter of fact, the Drug Free America Foundation specifically cited Oregon and Colorado as the places that they're working, and specifically has a website in each of those to oppose the current legalization petition. They aren't doing it in Washington.
It's not as liberal of a bill as Measure 80. I'm not as familiar with it as I am with I-502. But.
Right, but it's the same sort of concepts. As a matter of fact, the Drug Free America Foundation accidentally slipped up in some of their paperwork. And for Oregon, they say, so reject Amendment 64. And for Oregon, reject, like they were copying and pasting.
Well,
They're
yeah,
so
I'm
similar.
sure they were. It's all the same people.
And so their opposition is clear. It's clear. It's the same in every state. Do you see what I'm saying? So even though there's these mild differences in the legislation, the argument to oppose that aspect of the legislation fits both of them.
Right.
So their argument's easy.
All right. Well, there's our cue again. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. You're listening to A Different View.
I'm a love smoke the highest grade, cause when me smoke me get wise. Me take me bike and me rum. Yeah, that's so free and
Big Daddy Think.
Oh yeah, this is Big Daddy, and I'll be your freakazoid every Thursday night, right here at the Funky Roller Ring. Funky Roller Ring. 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, only on RadicalRuss.com.
Find me in Rosa's cantina. Music would play and Felina would whirl. Blacker than night were the eyes of Felina, wicked and evil while casting a spell. My love was deep for this Mexican maiden. I was in love, but in vain I could tell. One night a wild young cowboy came in, wild as the West Texas wind. Dashing and daring, the drink he was sharing with wicked Felina, the girl that I love. So in anger I challenge his right for the love of this maiden. Down went his hand for the gun that he wore.
That's an artist known as Sanchez with his cover of the Marty Robbins classic El Paso. We're back with A Different View.
Welcome back. I'm Jennifer here with Iva. Hello. So over the break, with a little assistance from Russ over there, we were sort of developing, what we were just talking about why we're so soundly being defeated currently in Oregon and Colorado. And the biggest point is that we aren't fighting against prohibition. It's so much easier to defeat it, for one, than it is to promote something that's unknown. You know what I mean? We know prohibition. It's easy to defeat it. But instead we keep working from the angle of trying to promote this future unknown that we have to sell to the public.
Right. Well, we have to, exactly. Legalization is unknown. What does regulation mean? People know what prohibition is. And most people are against prohibition. When you talk to them in those basic terms, like prohibition is bad. But legalization is a very scary idea. Like you said, it's an unknown. Right. And people aren't comfortable with an unknown.
Well, and I think, like, especially here in Oregon, I can say for sure that every time I talk to people about Measure 80, their questions are, why do I want to do this, And the answers always inevitably sound, well, because Measure 80 will do this and Measure 80 will do that. It's never because prohibition is bad.
Right.
We're so focused on what we're trying to do as opposed
to what we're trying
to get rid of.
Right.
And I think to some degree, at least in people's minds, they feel like they have to grab onto this new and keep it. When in reality, if Measure 80 isn't the right way, we can change it immediately. So really, we can change it next year. We can try 8 or 9 different things until we find the solution. What we're trying to agree on is to get rid of this.
Right. I think what you're onto is I think the next bills that we should be writing should come from the perspective of, we want to end, student loan restriction for students who are convicted of possession. We want to end or repeal, think in those type of languages. Like, you must
the whole initiative
repeal minimum
begin to end.
Yeah,
how you're selling it to the public, how it's written, how it's presented has to be about removing
the harm,
the harm, not
right. And
implementing new.
And that's right. And I think that focusing on what the true harm is of prohibition, rather than trying to say that, oh, isn't it great, legalization of marijuana is wonderful. Well, that's you and I that believes that. The rest of the community doesn't understand that, but they would come to an agreement. Almost everybody agrees, yeah, our prisons are too populated. Mm-hmm. They're overpopulated. We don't have the means. We don't have the resources. We don't have the space. We don't have the economic backbone to be able to continue. That's why they're becoming privatized. So, so having it, coming from that perspective, writing some sort of initiative that has that perspective in mind, we will no longer lock people up for blah, 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 for possession of this amount, rather than saying, we're going to remove all.
Well, and I think that even, and you're in the right direction, so don't misunderstand my disagreement, but I think part of the problem with that perspective is that they're responding with, well, we're not locking people into prison.
Well, then let's get rid of the laws.
Wait. The point is that it's not just about going to prison. It's about the harmful effects of continuing to engage a behavior that we've defined as wrong, criminally wrong.
Right.
Even if there's no punishment whatsoever, it is affecting your future.
Right.
Even if we completely disregard the law, but we just check off the box that you're now a
which
felon,
validates
we've affected your life.
Right, and so it validates the purpose of keeping it illegal and keeping prohibition you're absolutely right. We're not focusing on why the prohibition is bad and why that's a bad reason,
Well, right now they're saying,
well,
we're throwing them all in rehab, or we're just putting them on probation, but they're completely negating the actual harms that are coming to people because of these laws. Because it was never about being locked in a cage. I've heard people all my life in Indiana say 3 hots and a cot. They got nothing wrong with it. When they get out, that's when the problems begin.
Right, exactly.
So it's not about going to jail. If you're arguing too strongly that we're locking people up, they'll say, okay, we'll quit locking them up. They can go to rehab instead.
Right.
Well,
I'm not saying that make that your only focus.
No,
I'm
saying
that
that's why we need to focus on prohibition is harmful.
Right. And talking about that.
And then these are the harms from prohibition, but that there's a group of them, not just this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That prohibition is harmful has to be the main message.
And you were talking about, getting it short and sweet and in sound bites. Prohibition destroys families.
That's it. It's just simple and straightforward.
Or just destroys lives and families is one of them.
Prohibition destroys lives.
Yeah. And no, really, that right there, because it does. It destroys children's lives. And I on that long post that I was talking about that I found out was plagiarized one way or the other, one of the things that they had said in there was about how it affects children if we legalize. And I responded back, that one of the things that I see happening is how children are placed at a disadvantage now because of the harms that come to their parents from prohibition. So, like, if I get arrested and now I'm a felon and my student loans are cut off because of those, it's like 2 years or 3 years now as opposed to forever, which it used to be. But either way, at least for those 2 or 3 years now, I cannot be improving myself. So I'm kind of stuck in this particular economic paradigm with my children. And then I can't get certain jobs because I'm a felon, which affects my children. And I can't get certain housing, which affects my children. So these children are starting off with this disadvantage because of the harms that we're placing on their parents. And then we're saying, don't do drugs, and thinking that's going to help them. We've destroyed their lives already through the prohibition for their parents. Well, and it's not even about whether or not they care. It's that how can we say we've improved lives for these children when we've taken away their opportunity before they even started?
What was that movie? I think it was called Traffic.
There was a movie called Traffic.
It was about the drug war. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's been a few movies about the drug war.
This was like one of the first ones that really delved into the issues within the drug war, and it talked about all of those situations where it doesn't make sense. We want this to keep people, prohibit people from doing it in hopes that they'll stop just because we say it's prohibited. and then we enact all these other, laws and circumstances, and yet the outcome is still the same. So whether the drug is harming you, or the laws that are supposed to keep you from doing those drugs, or prevent you, from having the desire to do those drugs, are just as harmful, but in a whole other way. They have lifelong economic harms. And like you were saying, child starts off, in poverty, starts off in, housing situations and circumstances like that. And they're not going to grow up going, yeah, that was a good plan,
Well, and there's a lot of people I know, again, from growing up that, got into trouble, some sort of legal trouble, whether it was for possession of pot or for DUI or whatever, but got into some sort of illegal trouble that impacted their ability to get good jobs now because of being a criminal. And almost without fail, they end up selling marijuana or something else on the side because you can't live off those crappy jobs that you qualify for. So then they get busted for dealing, which makes it even worse. And it's like, it's sort of, so then you get out, now you're on probation or whatever, and you're being closely monitored. Now even just smoking a joint will get you thrown back in. And it's like, it's
not just smoking, it's just being around somebody, isn't it? If you're caught with somebody that has it.
If you're caught with somebody with it, you could. But I'm saying, like, then you fail your drug test for your probation, and now you're thrown back in. It's like, It seems almost like an inevitable cycle, the way that we create it. Like, if you're working at McDonald's and you're not allowed to get another job because you have to check this little box off on your application, and it's not paying your bills, what other options are you left
Don't you think?
with?
I mean, I think it's become ridiculous to try to find a job these days anyway, without, not just with prohibition, but I mean, you've got drug tests on top of that. Now they're checking your background, they're checking your credits, they're checking your Facebook, they're checking your Twitter, they're checking all your social medias. They want to know what your opinions are. They want to, and Russ and I, after the debate, we were watching, some of the other big corporations like the Koch brothers, who sent out threatening letters to their employees telling them to not vote, or to vote again, or to vote for Romney. I mean, I think, just being an employee in this country, all of our employee rights have just been stripped away.
Absolutely.
And prohibition is just all part of that. It's like, to me, it's like, you don't have the right to invade my privacy that much. I'm here only 8 hours. The rest of the time, I mean, if I were Facebooking at work, then you got to.
Well, the irony is that if you work for like a state employee, like if you're a public employee of any kind or whatever, they're not allowed to tell you how to vote. They're not allowed to use public time like that. They're not allowed to impact. But all these other employers can.
Right.
and so it brings the politics into every workplace. It's like the ones dealing with politics aren't allowed to touch politics, but everybody else is like able to. It's interesting how all of our laws work. We should have a lot more privacy than we do in all of our everything. On the other hand, the things that shouldn't be private are too often protected. Like in Oregon, most of our political campaigning is supposed to be public information. Like, you can't make a donation anonymously. It's not allowed.
Right.
So, like those billboards that went up, we should know who paid for those. We should know exactly how much it cost and how much other money they're spending to implement their desired rules. Is it coming from out of state, or are these local people trying to affect? That's another thing that we're told about all of these election laws. We aren't doing anything about those things, you know what I mean? But like on the other side, where it is affecting us, they have all the power and authority. Like, you can be fired, you can be harassed, it's a little messed up.
It's interesting how we have come in this country just to accept these laws as, I think a lot of people recognize that they're bad, but I think there's still so many people that are just completely checked out of the process. They feel defeated by it. And maybe it's because of the reasons that you listed earlier that, they start off being impacted by them. And that's just the way it is. And so, when you start your life off that way, one way, it's a little hard to change that.
Well, you've grown up your whole life knowing only that world. That's how the world works.
Right.
And why and it's ironic to me how many people that are affected directly by these laws push for harsher laws. after being experienced, they feel like, well, if it happened to me, it should happen to you. Nobody else should get off. I had to serve my time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Pull yourself away,
so it's almost like a vindictive thing. They want to make sure everybody has to serve their time. And so it reinforces those laws by the very people who are being beaten down by them.
Right. Well, it's always funny whenever I see a Republican sticker on a piece of crap car that's smoking and I think, this person is barely making it. And, I mean, that's just what goes through my mind. This person's barely making it, and they're going to vote against their own best interest. And we do it all the time. All right, there's our cue. We'll be right back. You're listening to A Different View.
I am just a man who's doing what he can, but policemen always come and take my weed.
How should I say this? You know how you enjoy a drink after work? Well, in many ways, I'm just like you. I have a good job, I work hard, but when I get home, I prefer to relax with marijuana instead of alcohol. They're a little similar, but marijuana is actually less damaging to my health, and frankly, I don't feel like crap the next day. I hope this makes sense, but if not, let's talk.
Burn some herb with me. Burn some herb with me tonight. Ooh, baby, can you stay just a little longer? Just a little longer. Don't leave me alone. Just a little longer. Load that chalice with me. Burn some herb tonight. Share a marijuana kiss with the taste of fruits wine under the moonlight all night. I got to tell you this today, just can't let you get away. Ain't got no time to play, that's all those dangerous delay. Forget about the past, that's yesterday. In your arms is where I wanna be. You look at me, I look away. The night light spread across your face, I look forward to the memories. We both thought it was a phase. Things grew stronger by the day. So on this occasion, would you love to burn some herb with me? Burn some herb with me tonight.
Music from Queen Ifrika with Burn Some Herb. We're now back with A Different View.
Burn some herb?
Burn some herbs.
Burn some herb.
Not bad. Not bad. So before the show, we were talking a little bit about those billboards.
Yes.
And so to summarize for, people that weren't aware of what was going on here, there were billboards that went up in 7 different locations around Portland, seemingly opposing.
It wasn't just in Oregon, though, wasn't it?
Well, hold on. These ones were just in Oregon.
Right.
There were 7 of them that showed a girl from a meth ad. She was a meth awareness model, from the years ago when meth was the target drug.
So not a real picture of a real meth addict, just someone dressed up to be
but
portray
representing a meth addict, right? And it said marijuana. What's good about it? Nothing. And so we got really upset. Started calling the we being our community got really upset and started calling Clear Channel Outdoor, who owns the signs, because the website listed on the signs didn't have any contact information. And after conversations with them, we discovered that the Mount Hood Coalition Against Drug Crime, a local community group that Shirley Morgan runs here locally, paid for them, according to the records there, but didn't give her number, gave some other number from a Florida group. And Clear eventually took the signs down because of all of the different information. That website wasn't associated with either of those 2 groups, and then you've got this one paying for it and this other phone number. They said that they had a policy of transparency and took them down. The people that paid for them wouldn't allow them to release any other information. So about a week ago, same thing happened in Ohio and Missouri, with many more boards. There were 140 billboards. And these ones, instead of being about marijuana, were meant to be scare ads focused on voter fraud. It said voter fraud is a crime and something about the time frame that you could be put in jail for voter fraud. And they put them up all over in low-income communities. Now, from my perspective, and I don't know how accurate this is, but my perspective is that there's a lot of voter disenfranchisement from felons and things like that, and a lot of people are confused about whether or not they have the right to vote. So this might discourage a lot of those people from even casting a vote out of fear that they would be accused of fraud because they didn't have the right. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right,
so
right.
It's meant to intimidate them out of voting.
Sure.
And again, by it being in the low-income minority kind of communities, just to intimidate them in general, it was the perspective of the people that got upset there and made their campaign to call. And when they called, they got almost an identical answer, that it was some family-friendly group that didn't want to reveal their name and would rather just take the billboards down than reveal their name, so they all came down.
Really?
Only in that case, Clear donated 12 billboards saying voting is a right. And so
after they took them down.
Yes.
Nice.
So they put up some billboards saying voting is a right. But still, we don't know who's doing this. And still, those billboards.
Well, and Clear's just taking the money for it.
Those billboards were up for X amount of time, making so many impressions on so many people in the population. They probably got a complete refund because they had to come down. Right. So it probably didn't cost them anything. And we don't even know who it is. And so they keep popping up doing these billboards. Wow. It's disturbing. It's disturbing. But the group that I believe that's behind it appears to be directly related tied to the group that was behind ours, the Drug Free America Foundation.
Save our
there's
society.
a Family Research Council, FRC.org. And there's a lot of similarities between the groups, but if you go to the Drug Free America Foundation's website, they actually link to them as one of their external links on their links page. So they're definitely at least supportive of this group. To see the identical strategy taking place tells me that this is probably something that they facilitate behind closed doors as the way that they're going to target their campaigns countrywide. And it applies equally to marijuana as it does to these other rights that they're fighting back against. So going back to what I said earlier, we need to be paying attention to our opposition and learning something, because these strategies are proving effective. And we, at the very least, need to know what they're doing so we can properly counter it.
Right.
Or B, we need to start following their example to make our messages, since it's working so well.
Well, and Newt Gingrich came out with, change the spin, and he was a pioneer at, changing the focus of the issue to get what you want. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. About instead of fighting for legalization, fight for ending prohibition and
defeat prohibition.
Defeat prohibition. Yeah, not ending, but defeat prohibition, and changing our strategy to focus on those ills rather than we want to go out and run naked in the woods and smoke marijuana. Sometimes we do. But anyway, so I think he was the king of doing that, and I think there's a lot to be learned, and he really changed our political climate, because now we have a lot of different euphemisms for things that don't mean that. Homeland Security, things like that. Drug enforcement officers. The Federal Drug Association, what those organizations have now become, and are not what they used to be, and part of that is because they've changed their language. They've changed what their emphasis is, if you will. I know it's not a really good example, but I think you get my point.
It's true. It's the words that we're using to define what it is, and the words that we're using.
Well, it's all about creating an image. It really is about creating an image. I mean, we talk about,
We're running out of time, but what is it basically? The Save the Beaten Dogs campaign or whatever will always win because nobody wants to see puppies getting beaten. You know, it doesn't matter what's behind it. You say that, you've got people weeping going, okay, I'm with you.
Or changing the channel.
Anyway, you're listening to A Different View. We're here every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Election night special coverage from 4 p.m. Pacific to 10 p.m.
Yes,
Pacific.
that'll be a great night.
And we're at Twitter at ADV420, Facebook A Different View 420, and on YouTube at A Different View 420.
All right, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.